The other night, I was at a dinner with some old friends. One of them, a guy who switched careers 4 times in 3 years, was explaining why he just walked out on his latest role and his apartment lease to reset in a city he'd only ever seen in travel reels. He looked around the table, half expecting a challenge. Instead, he got a chorus of rhythmic, supportive nodding. "Hey, man, you do you," one girl said, swirling her wine. "Who am I to judge? Your truth is your truth." There was a strange, almost sterile atmosphere in the room. On the surface, it looked like the peak of modern tolerance, a group of enlightened adults respecting each other's liquid lifestyles. But as I watched them, I noticed something unsettling. Their faces didn't show deep empathy. They showed a total lack of investment. By refusing to judge his choices, they were essentially saying his life had no weight. He was just another piece of content they were scrolling past in real time. It was the non-judgment of a spectator who doesn't care how the movie ends because they aren't in the cast. This instantaneous retreat into not judging has become our era's greatest shield, but also its sharpest paradox. We've been told that to judge is to be narrow-minded, yet the moment we stop judging, we actually stop thinking. We treat our relationships, our jobs, and even our own identities like a delivery app. If the experience isn't immediately stimulating, or if it demands too much depth, we simply close the tab and order something else. We've created a society where being judgmental is the only remaining sin, unaware that this total relativism is turning us into ghosts in our own lives. We are so busy avoiding the labels of others that we've lost the ability to find a common truth. But what happens when the entertainment stops, the likes fade, and we realize that by refusing to take a stand, we've actually just surrendered our ability to be human? That's silence at the table. It's been sticking with me for days. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum. It felt like a very specific kind of modern paralysis where we've somehow confused indifference with high moral virtue. We're patting ourselves on the back for simply not caring enough to have an opinion.
It's a haunting image, isn't it? The nodding head, so affirmative. You're right to feel unsettled because what you were watching wasn't just a quirk of your friend group. You were watching a symptom of a much deeper structural shift.
Yeah, a structural shift.
We aren't just losing our manners. We are losing the ability to distinguish reality from performance. We are drifting into a world where the very idea of an objective standard, something you can actually lean on, is being dissolved. Yeah.
Dissolution, like nothing is solid anymore. And I want to dig into that today because if we can't judge, and I don't mean being mean or petty, I mean the act of discernment of saying this is good and this is bad, then how do we build anything?
Right.
How do you build a career, a relationship, or even a building if you aren't allowed to say this foundation is weak?
Sir, I mean, civilization is essentially a series of judgments. It's the constant process of separating what works from what doesn't, what is true from what is false. When you remove judgment, you aren't left with tolerance. You're left with noise and, eventual collapse.
Well, let's talk about that collapse, because I stumbled across something recently that took this metaphor of building and made it terrifyingly literal. It's a story about standards, or rather the death of them. I recently came across a story about a high-end architectural firm in London, a place once defined by the rigorous pursuit of structural perfection. Imagine a senior lead named Elias, a man who spent decades mastering the tension of steel and the logic of stone. Lately, the firm adopted a non-judgmental feedback culture to protect the emotional well-being of its junior staff. When a new designer submitted a blueprint for a public pavilion that was aesthetically pleasing but mathematically precarious, Elias was told by HR that he couldn't critique the work in a way that implied an objective standard of wrongness. To do so would be to impose his subjective truth onto another's creative process. Consequently, the project languished in a state of perpetual revision because no one was allowed to say, "This will not hold." The meritocracy that once built the city's skyline began to erode, replaced by a polite functional paralysis where feeling included mattered more than the bridge actually standing. Reading this, I felt a strange mix of empathy and concern. As someone who analyzes the digital landscape for a living, I understand the desire to move away from the harsh, often exclusionary hierarchies of the past. We want everyone to feel they have a place at the table. But watching this story unfold, I can't help but feel that when we stop judging quality, we stop valuing the very effort it takes to achieve it. If every truth is equally valid, then the word excellence loses its meaning, and eventually, the structures, both literal and social, that we all rely on will start to lean.
It is a perfect, terrifying encapsulation of the problem.
Right.
You have Elias, who represents the old world of objective reality physics, gravity, load-bearing capacities.
Things that are, true whether you believe in them or not.
Exactly. And then you have the new world, represented by HR, where the primary reality is emotional safety. The internal state is what matters most.
But that's the insanity of it. Gravity doesn't have an HR department.
Yeah.
If that pavilion goes up and the wind shear hits it wrong, it collapses. It doesn't matter how validated the junior designer felt during the meeting.
The command "do not judge" is paradoxically a very harsh judgment. It's a dogmatic assertion that feelings trump physics.
It's a judgment against judgment itself.
In that firm, they are prioritizing the internal emotional state of the designer over the external physical reality of the building. Now, we are terrified of the hierarchy of competence.
Because competence implies inequality. If Elias knows more than the junior designer, then they aren't equal in that specific context. And we seem to have decided that inequality of any kind is intolerable, even if it's based on 30 years of experience building things that don't fall down.
Right. We are dismantling meritocracy because meritocracy requires judgment. You have to be able to say, this person is better at this task than that person.
Sure.
But if better is just a subjective opinion, if your truth is your truth, then meritocracy is impossible. You can't have a meritocracy of feelings.
But wait, I want to push back on the meritocracy thing for a second. Because usually when we hear people criticizing meritocracy, it's from the other side.
Okay.
They say it's a sham because the system is rigged. The poor kid doesn't get the same shot as the rich kid, so merit is just a cover for privilege.
That is the common critique, and it's often true. There's a lot of validity to that. But there's another darker side to meritocracy that we rarely talk about, and it connects directly to this refusal to judge. It's about what happens in the minds of the people who win.
The winners, you mean the people at the top of the firm, like the senior partners?
Yes. There is a fascinating body of research on what's called meritocratic bias. There was a study, and this is really quite stunning, where they gathered a group of participants for what they were told was an economics game. But the game was rigged. They handed out money to people based purely on a lottery. Random chance. Everyone in the room knew it was a lottery. There was no skill involved.
Okay, so I walk in, I draw a winning ticket, I get cash. I know I didn't earn it.
You know you didn't earn it. It's explicit. But then the researchers watched what happened to the winners' brains over the course of the session. As they sat there with their pile of money, they started to change.
Change how?
When asked about tax rates and redistribution for the group, the lottery winners started proposing significantly lower taxes than the losers. They became less generous.
Even though they knew it was luck.
They started to rationalize it. They started to believe on a subconscious level that they deserved the money. They started acting as if their status as a winner was a reflection of some innate quality, not just a random number generator.
That is bizarre. It's like their brain couldn't handle the dissonance of, I have this, but I didn't earn it. So it rewrote reality to say, I have this, therefore I must be special.
It's a powerful cognitive bias. Cognitive scientists call this the Wason-task connection. It's about confirmation bias on steroids.
The Wason task.
Sure. It's a famous logic puzzle that shows how people tend to seek out information that confirms their existing beliefs and avoid information that contradicts them. In similar experiments to the lottery one, successful people will actively pay money to avoid seeing data that proves their success was luck.
They'll pay. You mean they lose money just to stay ignorant?
They will incur a financial cost to protect their ego from the truth.
So they are literally buying ignorance.
They are buying the illusion of merit. So bring this back to your architect story. You have two disasters happening at once. At the bottom, you have a refusal to judge competence because we want to protect feelings. Don't tell the junior designer he's wrong.
Right.
But at the top, among the elites, you have a refusal to judge themselves. You have people who are winning by luck or circumstance, convincing themselves they are geniuses. The Elon Musk archetype, the solitary genius who did it all himself.
It's a pincer movement against reality. The junior staff isn't allowed to fail, and the senior staff isn't allowed to admit they got lucky.
And in the middle, the bridge falls down because no one is looking at the actual structure anymore. Everyone is looking at their own reflection. The elites are looking in the mirror saying, I'm a genius, and the juniors are looking in the mirror saying, I'm valid, but no one is looking at the steel.
This obsession with the self, with protecting our own narrative, it spills out of the workplace pretty fast. I mean, if you can't deal with friction in a blueprint meeting, how on earth do you deal with friction in a marriage? Or a friendship.
You don't. You treat people like content. You scroll past them.
Which reminds me of another story I read recently. It was a profile of this guy, Julian. And it felt like the human version of that architectural paralysis. I saw a profile recently of a man named Julian, a quintessential digital nomad living in the liquid modernity of Berlin's tech scene. Julian's life is a masterclass in the entertainment society. His social media is a seamless loop of vibrant cafes, weekend raves, and spontaneous trips to Ibiza. He treats his life as a series of curated experiences, moving from one startup to another the moment the vibe shifts from excitement to actual labor. When his long-term partner suggested they buy an apartment and start a family, Julian felt a sense of suffocating claustrophobia. To him, commitment was a stagnation of the self. He left within a week, citing the need to remain open to the universe. He is perfectly free, yet he is utterly untethered, living in a world where the pursuit of the next dopamine hit has replaced the heavy, meaningful burden of responsibility to others. It's easy to look at Julian and feel a flash of envy for that level of mobility, and I think we all secretly crave that escape from the mundane. But as I reflected on his story, I realized it highlights a profound loneliness hidden behind the neon lights. We've turned our lives into a consumer product, where even our relationships must provide entertainment value or be discarded. There is a sadness in this liquid world. When nothing is allowed to be heavy or permanent, nothing can ever truly be deep. We are trading the soul of our society for a never-ending stream of content.
Julian is a tragedy disguised as a success story.
He looks like he's winning, but at what?
He is the embodiment of what the sociologist Zygmunt Bauman called liquid modernity.
Liquid modernity. I've heard that term thrown around, usually by people trying to sound smart at parties, but let's actually nail down what Bauman meant. Because liquid sounds nice. It sounds adaptable.
And that's the seduction of it. Bauman was writing about the shift from the solid phase of history to the fluid phase. Think about your grandfather's generation.
Okay.
Life was solid. You were born into a town, a class, a religion, a trade. You probably worked for one company for 40 years. It was restrictive, yes. It was hard to move. But it was solid. You knew who you were and where you fit.
You had a container. Your life had a shape.
A very rigid shape, but a shape nonetheless.
No, it's all melted.
All those forms have melted. The job market is fluid gig economy, contracts, pivoting, relationships are fluid, serial monogamy, situationships, even identity is fluid.
Right.
Bauman argued that in this state, the ultimate value is flexibility. But think about what flexibility means for an object. If something is infinitely flexible, it holds no shape. It offers no resistance.
So if you're infinitely flexible, you're spineless.
In a structural sense, yes. Julian is terrified of solidification. Buying an apartment is solid. Having a child is the most solid thing a human can do. It pins you to a place and a time for decades.
It's an anchor.
And to Julian, that anchor looks like a prison. It looks like death. He wants to remain liquid so he can flow into whatever container looks most fun at the moment.
But the cost is that he's essentially a tourist in his own life.
Bauman actually uses the tourist as a key archetype for this era.
The tourist.
Yeah. The tourist goes places, consumes the sights, eats the food, but takes no responsibility for the local government, the trash, or the poverty. They are there to consume the experience and then leave. Julian is touring his girlfriends. He's touring his careers.
That connects to something I've been thinking about regarding seduction. It feels like we aren't governed by rules anymore, but by what grabs our attention.
Observation. In the solid era, we were governed by normative regulation, meaning society said, do this because it is your duty, stay in this marriage because you made a vow. It was coercion, sure, but it built stability. Now, the market and the state govern us through seduction. They don't say you must, they say, wouldn't you like? Don't you deserve?
Wouldn't you like to go to Ibiza? Don't you deserve a partner who never challenges you?
Exactly. And this creates a specific personality type. Christopher Lasch saw this coming decades ago when he wrote The Culture of Narcissism.
Right.
Now, people hear narcissism and they think of Trump or a Kardashian, someone obsessed with their own face. But Lasch meant something much more subtle and terrifying.
He wasn't talking about vanity.
No, not just vanity. He was talking about the performing self.
The performing self.
Lasch argued that in a modern bureaucracy or a service economy, you don't succeed by producing tangible goods, like a farmer or a blacksmith. You succeed by managing people's impressions of you. You are constantly selling your personality.
So we're all PR agents for V Inc.
We have to be. Lasch wrote this haunting line. We need no reminder to smile. In the past, you smiled when you were happy. Now you smile because it's part of the transaction. And because we spend all our energy on the performance of living, we've actually lost the skills required for actual living.
The skills, you mean like life skills?
I mean the de-skilling of intimacy.
Wow.
Think about Julian again. Why did he run when his partner asked for commitment? It's not just that he didn't want it. It's likely that he literally could not do it. He lacks the emotional tools.
Because commitment requires friction. It requires fighting, forgiving, compromising, being bored together.
And those are skills. You have to learn them. But in the entertainment society, we outsource everything. We use apps to find dates. We use therapists to mediate our conflicts. We use experts to tell us how to raise our kids. We have forgotten how to handle the raw, messy friction of human interaction.
So we only know the highlight reel.
We only know how to consume the image of a relationship.
It's like the difference between playing a video game of a war and actually being a soldier. Julian is playing Sims, Relationship Edition. And the moment the game gets too hard or the graphics glitch, he resets the console.
And this brings us to the Neil Postman comparison, which I think is the nail in the coffin for Julian.
Amusing ourselves to death.
Exactly. Postman compared the two great dystopian visions, Orwell's 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World.
Orwell feared the boot on the face, the state banning books, censorship.
Yeah. Right. But Huxley feared the state where no one wants to read books because they are too busy with the feelies, the sensory distractions, the orgies, the soma.
The constant entertainment.
The constant entertainment.
Yeah.
Julian isn't living in Orwell's nightmare. No one is forcing him to leave Berlin at gunpoint. He is living in Huxley's nightmare.
He is amusing himself to death.
He's trading his freedom for a sensory loop.
And the worst part is, he thinks he's free. He thinks running away is freedom. But he's just a slave to his own dopamine receptors.
He is a slave to the immediate. And a society built on the immediate cannot sustain a future.
So we've looked at the workplace, where we can't judge quality. We've looked at the individual, who can't judge what matters. But what happens when you zoom out to the community level? I saw this play out in a story about a small town that trying to update its morality. And the results were, well, let's just say they were complicated. Try to imagine a small town in the Pacific Northwest where the local community center used to be governed by a set of common decency rules, simple organic truths that everyone agreed upon. Recently, those rules were replaced by a therapeutic framework administered by state-funded consultants. When a group of teenagers began vandalizing the park, the response wasn't a moral lecture or a community-led reparation, but a series of healing circles where the behavior was reframed as a manifestation of unmet emotional needs. The language of right and wrong was replaced by the language of trauma and processing. While well-intentioned, the result was a community where no one felt empowered to hold anyone else accountable. The organic bonds of the neighborhood dissolved into a series of clinical interactions managed by a distant bureaucracy, and the common truths that used to make people feel safe were replaced by a sea of moral relativism. As a YouTuber who often covers social shifts, I see the value in the therapeutic approach. It's important to understand the why behind people's actions and to lead with compassion. However, I'm struck by how this shift often strips a community of its own agency. When we outsource our morality to experts and replace shared values with clinical labels, we lose the common story that holds a society together. We become a collection of individuals being managed rather than a community living together. It makes me wonder if, in our attempt to be infinitely understanding, we are accidentally dismantling the very foundations of social trust.
You've hit on something that James Nolan and Thomas Szasz spent their careers analyzing. It's the shift from the theocratic to the therapeutic.
Theocratic sounds intense, like we're living in The Handmaid's Tale. But we clearly aren't.
Well, historically, most societies were theocratic in the broad sense. They were governed by a moral code, often religious, that dealt in binaries, good and evil, virtue and sin.
A shared framework.
A shared framework, yes. If you vandalized the park in that old framework, you committed a sin or a crime. You did something bad.
Ow.
Now we have replaced the priest with the psychiatrist. We don't have sin anymore. We have sickness. We don't have evil. We have pathology.
So the kid smashing the gazebo isn't a vandal. He's acting out trauma.
The explanation for his behavior moves from the moral realm to the medical realm. And on the surface, this looks like progress. It looks like compassion.
And that's hard to argue against. I mean, if a kid is hurting, we should want to help them.
Of course. No one is arguing against compassion. But Thomas Szasz, who was a psychiatrist himself, warned about the myth of mental illness when it enters the legal and social sphere.
The myth of mental illness, that sounds That sounds pretty provocative.
Understood. Saz wasn't saying people don't suffer from depression or anxiety. He was critiquing the way we use these labels as a tool of social control. He argued that when you define behavior as an illness, you strip the actor of responsibility.
Because you can't blame someone for having the flu.
Right. Liberty and responsibility are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. If you say, this teenager is not responsible for smashing the window because of his trauma, you are also saying, this teenager is not a fully free agent.
Yeah.
You are reducing him to a biological machine that malfunctions.
You're turning him into a patient.
And patients don't have rights in the same way citizens do. Patients need to be managed. They need interventions. This is what we call the therapeutic state. It's a form of governance where the state doesn't punish you, it treats you.
This is the medicalization of everything. It's not just vandalism. It's alcoholism, it's sadness, it's fidgeting in class. Everything is a syndrome.
And because everything is a syndrome, the new priestly class creates itself. The experts, the consultants in your story.
The facilitators.
The facilitators. Notice what happened in that town. In the old days, if a kid broke a window, the neighbor would come out and yell or tell the parents, and the community would handle it. Correct? It was horizontal.
But now they have to call in the facilitators.
The expert inserts themselves between the neighbors. Don't judge the child, they say. Let us handle the healing circle. The organic bond of the community is severed, and it's replaced by a bureaucratic transaction.
The community loses its agency.
Completely. They can't solve their own problems anymore. They have to wait for the expert to arrive with the clipboard.
It feels like this connects back to the truth thing we started with. Your truth is your truth. Because if we can't say vandalism is bad, if we have to say vandalism is a cry for help, we've lost the ability to use moral language.
Nolan calls this the emotivist ethic.
Emotivist. From emotion.
Yes. In a therapeutic culture, the highest source of truth is how you feel. I think is replaced by I feel.
I feel like this law is unjust. I feel like you are oppressing me.
And because feelings are internal and subjective, they cannot be debated. If you say, I think this tax policy is wrong, we can look at data. We can have an argument. But if you say, I feel hurt by this tax policy, the argument is over.
Right. I can't tell you that you don't feel hurt.
Yeah. So it shuts down discourse.
It kills it.
It kills it. And it leads to the pathologization of dissent. This is a terrifying trend. If the state is therapeutic, if it's just trying to heal us, then anyone who disagrees with the state isn't just a political opponent. They are sick.
Oh, I see this. If you disagree with the consensus, you're phobic. You're irrational. You need sensitivity training. You don't need a debate. You need re-education.
Exactly. It turns political disagreement into a mental health diagnosis. And once you diagnose your opponent, you don't have to listen to them. You just have to cure them.
That is Orwellian, but with a smile.
It's Huxley again, and it creates what Nolan calls a victimhood culture, where claiming victim status becomes a form of currency. It becomes cultural capital.
And it all leads to the palliative society.
We aren't solving problems, we are anesthetizing them. We are using consumption and therapy to numb the pain of living in a fractured world.
We have the architect, where we've lost the standard of quality. We have Julian, where we've lost the standard of commitment. And we have the town, where we've lost the standard of morality.
They're all symptoms of the same condition.
They all seem to be drifting.
Drifting is the right word. Zygmunt Bauman had a term for this specific moment in history. He called it the interregnum.
That's a Latin term, isn't it? Between kings.
Yes. It refers to the chaotic period after the old king dies, but before the new king is crowned. The old ways, the nation state, the church, the solid career, the nuclear family, they are dying or dead. They don't work the way they used to.
But the new ways.
We haven't invented them yet. We are living in the void.
It explains the anxiety. Everyone feels like they're treading water.
And there is a structural reason for that anxiety. Bauman pointed to the divorce of power and politics.
Okay, distinguish those for me.
Power is the ability to do things, to move capital, to start wars, to change economies.
The levers.
The actual levers. Politics is the ability to decide what should be done. Historically, both lived in the nation state. The government had the power in the politics. Now power has evaporated. It has gone into the space of flows, global finance, the internet, multinational tech giants. It ignores borders, but politics. Politics is still stuck on the ground. Cool.
So the local mayor, or even the president, has the politics, the mandate to rule, but the actual power is floating above their heads in the cloud.
So we have power free from political control and politics devoid of actual power.
Yeah.
That is why that town council feels so helpless. They can't stop the economic forces hollowing out their town. They focus on language, they focus on therapy, they focus on policing symbols. It's the only lever they have left to pull.
We are rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, but we're calling the deck chairs healing circles.
And we are fiercely judging anyone who arranges the chairs incorrectly while ignoring the iceberg.
It's a frantic kind of modernization.
Yeah.
We aren't running toward a vision of the future. We're just running away from the past.
It's fear-based flexibility. We are terrified of being obsolete, so we adapt it, we reset like Julian, not because we want to, but because we are afraid if we stop moving, we'll sink.
And this brings us all the way back to the start, the non-judgment, that dinner party. The reason they were nodding at my friend wasn't because they respected him. It was because judging him would require taking a stand. It would require being solid.
And in a liquid world, being solid is dangerous. If you take a stand, you become a target. So we retreat into the role of the spectator. We turn the people around us into objects. When you refuse to judge someone, you are refusing to engage with their humanity. To be human is to be a moral agent. It is to be capable of right and wrong.
Okay.
If I look at you and say, whatever you do is fine, your truth is your truth, I am saying that your actions have no consequence. I am saying you don't matter.
I'm treating you like a TV show. I can watch, I can be entertained, but I'm not involved.
We consume each other's lives like we consume tourism. We want the vibe, but not the responsibility. Christopher Lasch called this a civilized hell.
A civilized hell.
We are polite. We are inclusive, we smile, we use the correct terminology, we never judge, but we are utterly alone. We are ghosts floating past each other, terrified of making contact because contact might hurt.
The therapeutic state, liquid modernity, narcissism, it paints a picture of a world that is technically free. We have no kings, no priests, no rigid bosses, but it feels incredibly thin, like the atmosphere is leaking out.
It's a world that values credibility over truth, as Postman would say. It values health, just feeling okay, over virtue actually being good. And it values safety over life.
I want to go back to that dinner table one last time. The silence in that room, that comfortable, smiling non-judgment, wasn't peace. It was the sound of people who have forgotten that life requires friction to be real. We are terrified of the weight of our own choices, so we pretend they don't matter. We pretend that everything is valid, so that nothing has to be true. But the architecture of a life, like the architecture of a bridge, relies on tension, on standards, and yes, on judgment. When we refuse to say this is good and this is bad, we aren't being tolerant. We're just drifting. And a life spent drifting, no matter how well curated the photos are, isn't a journey. It's just a long, slow dissolution into the background noise.